tarmac, baby.
The bridge is out! What? The bridge is out!
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today's video that is going to be an airline part 2 video. For the ones who haven't checked our last airline video, please give it a look. In that one we recommended Spirit Airlines, and since then we bought into it and it has done extremely well. Returned so far 40.94% as of recording of this video. The market is volatile these days and there's quite a big of up and down swings in a lot of different stocks and sectors, so it can quickly change. However, at the moment it seems to have been a good investment, and we think that that will continue going forward as the globally the vaccines are being rolled out and the market starts to open up, and the countries in general. So today we're going to take a look at 5 other companies and we're going to see if we can find any good opportunities like the one we found with Spirit Airlines. So as we can see from this 2-year return, we have 5 different companies. The first one is JetBlue. It is the one who has returned the least over a 2-year period, 11.88%. And as we can see, JetBlue has close to but still not recovered fully from the crash due to the corona situation in March last year. They are still recovering a bit. They have a market cap of $8.1 billion. Then we have Alaska Air, stock ticker ALK here in the orange. The price is $65.42 a share and the market cap is $5.8 billion. That one has close to recovered since the coronavirus, and it has gained over the last 2 years 20.95%. Next on the list we have Ryanair, the Irish company from Europe, low-cost carrier. They have returned 46.55%. The price today is $109.11 US, and the market cap is $24.6 billion. So considerably bigger than Alaska Air and JetBlue. We then have Mesa Airlines, stock ticker Mesa. The price is $14.16 USD and the market cap is only $0.5 billion. That has returned 51.61% over the last 2 years. And finally we have Allegiant, stock ticker ALGT. The price is $252.19. The market cap is $4.1 billion and they have returned 99.01%. So as we can see, since the crash, Allegiant is considerably above what it was in March 1 year ago. And although we would expect then that the numbers are good for Allegiant, it is quite crazy to think that it is so much higher than what it was a year ago, considering that revenue must have gone down because obviously there has been lockdowns, the flight traffic has more or less stopped globally. So this is a bit of surprise to us. So we are quite excited to see the numbers of Allegiant because we're expecting them to be good. So we would obviously expect that these companies have been struggling and losing money in the last 1 year, and we can see all of them, with the exception of Mesa Airlines, have lost considerable amount of money. Mesa Airlines, by surprise, have actually earned $31 million US. So that is quite impressive to see such a number already from the beginning, considering the market situation for the airline companies. Otherwise, we can see Ryanair 1.5 billion, 1.36 billion for JetBlue, 1.3 billion for ALK, and $184 million for ALGT, which is obviously not that bad. We can see that ALK, out of their loss, had a big impairment of $627 million US, similar to a lot of the other big airlines in US. So again, no surprise there. But we would say overall, very impressive number from Mesa Airlines on the get-go. Obviously, this is also reflected in the net margin, where they are doing far better than the 4 other companies. We can also take a look at the B-Niche M-score, which is a mathematical model that determines whether a company has manipulated its profit. We want this to be less than 2.22. And again, no red flags for any of the companies here. If we take a look at the Sloan Ratio, it identifies if a substantial part of the earnings are non-cash accruals. We're not interested in that, so we want this number to be between -10 to 10%. And we can see Mesa Airlines sticks out a little bit here with 11%, but that's not really something to be that worried about. So across the board, you can definitely see that Mesa Airlines have done extremely well compared to the other 4 companies. So again, on the overall ranking, we looked first at the trend of all these stocks. They are all in an uptrend. Most of them have recovered from or close to recovered from the downtrend that they experienced in March last year due to the corona situation, and they are more or less all of them back into the same range in terms of share price. On the net income part, Mesa Airlines are the only one who is positive, and obviously on the net profit margin, they're also considerably better than all the others who have posted big losses over the last year. Allegiant was the one who has done the best besides Mesa Airlines, which again we would also expect considering the huge increase in their share price over the last 6 months. We then move into the return metrics, and here we want to understand how high returns and cash flow margins has been generated by these companies. And without spending too much time, it has become clearly evident that Mesa Airlines is sticking out as the one who is delivering superior results compared to the 4 other companies, especially the free cash flow yield here on 39% is quite impressive given the market situation. After that, we have Allegiant and Ryanair with semi-ish numbers, and JetBlue and Alaska Airlines are definitely doing the worst among the 5 companies. The next section is the balance sheet section, and this is obviously a very crucial one to understand how strong the financial positions are of these companies. If we take a look at the current ratio, we want this to be above 1, and we can see that they are not too far away from that. Allegiant actually doing quite well here with 1.4. Similar on the cash ratio, we would like this to be above 1, but we do understand for the given situations with the airlines, a lot of them may be struggling to reach that. And as we can see here, more or less all companies, with the exceptions of Allegiant, are just around the 1 mark. Next, we can take a look at the total assets versus total liabilities. We in general want this to be above 1.5, and here it is only Ryanair that supersedes that. The rest are below, which again just illustrates that all of them are in a little bit difficult spot. On the debt equity ratio part, we can see that it's looking quite alright for Ryanair and JetBlue, while as it's a little bit high for Mesa and Alaska Airlines, and 2.5 on Allegiant is not that good. We then have the Altman Z score, which is a credit strength test that assesses the likelihood of bankruptcy. In general, we want this to be above 1.8. And here we can see that all companies, with the exception of Ryanair and Allegiant, is actually looking quite bad. I would have expected a little bit better number for Mesa given the current results that they were showing, so that's a little bit surprising. However, if we take a look at the Piotrowski score, which is another way to assess the strength of the company's financial position, Mesa Airline actually scores quite well. As I mentioned in several of the videos, we prefer Altman Z score above Piotrowski score, but we still see them as quite good complements to each other. For the other ones on the Piotrowski score, we can see here it's quite interesting. So here Ryanair is scoring very poor and only has a 2. So they have a relative good on the Altman Z score and a relatively poor on the Piotrowski score. The Piotrowski score only looks over the last 12 months. And again, we think it's important to have a bit longer time horizons, which is the case with Altman Z score. So again, that's just the reason why we prefer that. But overall, it is not looking that bad, but it's neither looking fantastic for these companies as we would expect given the current situation. So in the overall ranking, we look at the return on invested capital. Mesa Airlines doing far better than the others. Allegiant number 2, and Ryanair and Alaska Airlines sharing a 3rd place, while as JetBlue is performing the worst. On the levered free cash flow margin, more or less a similar situation. Mesa Airlines the best and Allegiant number 2. On the Untitled Ratio, Ryanair was actually looking quite okay here, Mesa Airlines looking respectively, while as JetBlue, Alaska and Allegiant could have been better. On the debt equity part, Ryanair and JetBlue surprisingly looking quite okay, while as Mesa, Alaska and Allegiant were looking a bit worse. But again, the only one we would be concerned about from a debt equity perspective would be Allegiant, which has a 2.5. We then move into the shareholder yield part, and we want to understand how much value is returned to shareholders either through dividend and or buyback. If we take a look at the dividend yield, we can see that there's a small one on Alaska Airlines, Allegiant on 0.58 and 0.3%. A lot of the companies, given the current situation, have obviously suspended or cut the dividend significantly. So again, if you're a dividend-oriented investor, these are definitely not the companies you want to look at. If we take a look at the buyback yield, we can see that Ryanair had issued more shares over the last 12 months. JetBlue has actually repurchased a lot of shares, which in general would be a good indication, but when we know the financial situation and the results, obviously this is not something that we are too fond of, and this is also one of the criticisms that has been on a lot of the airlines, that they have had big share buyback programs when there has been so much troubles over the last year or two. So again, we wouldn't really, if you're a dividend or buyback yield oriented investor, again, we wouldn't see those as being sustainable given the current situation. So definitely do not select the companies based on this. We then move into the earnings per share and growth, and here we are obviously interested in understanding whether these companies are expected to grow in the future. And on the PE ratio, obviously with the negative results, we do not have the PE ratio. We can look at the forward PE ratio, and here it's actually interesting that Ryanair is expected to become profitable again over the next 12 months. JetBlue is expected to stay in the negative zone. Mesa Airlines is expected to move into negative territory. So we saw that they have earned money in during the last 12 months, but that is expected to change over the next 12 months. So that's something you might want to be aware about if you are investing in them. While as Allegiant and Alaska Airlines are expected to go into profitability again, which is obviously good to see. On the EPS growth year on year, huge decreases for all companies, 232% for Ryanair, 357% for JetBlue, 24% for Mesa Airlines, actually not that bad. ALK 271% and 181 for Allegiant. So across the board, really not that good. And if we take a look at the revenue growth for the last 12 months, again, huge negative results, which you would expect. 68% for Ryanair, 46% for JetBlue. Mesa Airlines, again, doing the best with 30%, 59% for Alaska Airlines, and 46% for Allegiant. So again, across the 5 companies, significant reduction in revenues, which is suspected, of course, given the current situation. And this is then also reflected in the revenue that they have had over the last 12 months. But again, what we are interested in is to see how is the expectation for the next year. And what we can see is that a further reduction is expected in Ryanair. JetBlue expecting to do a big rebound and almost growing their revenue with 100%. So that's going to be quite interesting to see if that's going to unfold. Mesa Airlines, we unfortunately do not have any estimate on them. Alaska Airlines, similar to JetBlue, is also expected to receive a rebound in the revenue over the next 12 months. And the same with Allegiant, which is expecting around 60%. So again, keep in mind here, some of them are expected to rebound from a revenue perspective, but that does not mean that they will become profitable still. Ryanair is expected to have significant reduction in revenue, which is a bit surprising to us, but it is just an estimate and things may change. Perhaps this is due to that they expect that the recovery in Europe is going to be slower than, for example, in the US in terms of vaccines. We're not 100% sure, but that could be a reason for that. We would, though, say that one of the countries or areas in Europe which is doing quite well is actually the UK and all the countries there. They are pretty fast with the vaccines. They have done a lot better than the European Union. And, Ryanair has a lot of the passengers from the UK, obviously. So again, we would take this number with a little bit of grain of salt because we would actually expect Ryanair to rebound quite nicely. So back to the overall ranking. We looked at the EPS growth forecast for the last 5 years. We didn't mention that before, sorry, but the only number we had from there is Ryanair, which is expected to have a 10% increase in the EPS growth forecast for the next 5 years. That's obviously good. From a revenue growth perspective, over the last 12 months, all of them had really poor results naturally, but Mesa Airlines were the one who had done the least bad, followed by Allegiant Airlines and JetBlue. On the net income growth for the last 12 months, it was a similar situation. Mesa Airlines and Allegiant Airlines were the ones who have done the best. And again, this is just a clear indicator when we see through all these numbers and we see the return on the share prices of the stocks. It is by no surprise that it is Mesa Airlines and Allegiant that has done the best, because overall they are the ones who have the most solid numbers, at least compared to the 3 other companies, Ryanair, JetBlue and Alaska Airlines. Finally, we obviously want to understand whether these companies are currently under or overvalued. And if we take a look across the board, our own estimated intrinsic value of these companies tells us that there's a small downside on 2% of Ryanair. JetBlue has the largest one on 18%. Mesa Airlines has 13% at least. For Mesa Airline specifically, one of the things that we're struggling to understand is how the stock could have increased with 500 or 600% compared to the lowest point at the corona situation in March last year. I mean, even if the stock has done extremely well, there's nothing that justifies that it should suddenly be 5 or 6 times much worth as it is today. And that's why we are definitely seeing a downside on them. They are still doing really well, but we do not think that this is sustainable in the long run unless their numbers continue to perform extraordinarily well, which does not seem to be the case from the estimations that we are seeing. Alaska Airlines, we see a small upside on 1%, and on Allegiant Airlines, we also see a downside on around 19%. It is a similar situation to Mesa Airlines. We don't really see that the numbers are justifying the big increases in the share price to be above where it was before the corona situation. We just don't understand and see the logic of this, and that's why we see overall a larger downside on them as well. We can also take a look at some other indicators. One of them is the book value per share and the BV ratio, and here we want this to be above 1 because it means that it is undervalued. If it's below 1, it is considered overvalued, and as we can see here across the board, all of them are overvalued, although Mesa Airlines are not too far away here with 0.93%, which means that the share price is actually relatively close to the book value. We can also look at the relative strength index, the RSI, for the last 14 days. We want this to be below 30 because it means that it's oversold and it may go in an uptrend. Vice versa, if it's above 70, it's in overbought territory, and this could be an indication that there's going to come a pullback. So if we look at Ryanair there in the middle, JetBlue, Alaska Airlines is close to overbought territory, and both Mesa Airlines and Allegiant is in overbought territory. This could just be an indication, technical indicator, that they may do a pullback in the coming period. So again, if you are thinking about investing in any of these companies within the next days, please keep this in mind because there's an indicator that they may do a pullback based from this technical indicator. Finally, we can also take a look at what the analyst perspective is. And basically, if we take a look, they believe that there's an upside on 10% on Ryanair, so slightly different from what we are seeing. They see a downside on JetBlue on 20%, so relatively aligned with us. They see a downside on 35% of Mesa Airlines. Again, quite significant difference from us, but at least we're quite aligned on the downside on Mesa. And again, considering the increase in share price that they have had, it could definitely be that it's going to fall more than the 13% that we are seeing. Alaska Airlines, we're quite in a disagreement with them. They see a downside on 17%, and on Allegiant they see a downside on 30%. As we always say, we do not follow the analysts blindly because they sometimes have their own agenda and reasonings for why they're recommending a particular stock, but it's always interesting to see if the numbers aligns more or less up with what we at least seeing. And in some of the cases we can see that we're relatively aligned, in others we're in a little bit more disagreement with the analyst. So finally, if we take a look at the intrinsic overall value assessment of all these companies, in our opinion, they are all overvalued. Again, some are more overvalued than others. We know Ryanair is a very strong company, but we still see that that is slightly overvalued. Although the analyst says something different. JetBlue definitely overvalued. They're posting the worst numbers of all the 5 companies. Mesa Airlines, extremely good numbers. However, we see them as being overvalued. Alaska Airlines, we see a small upside on them. However, there can be, small changes in the estimates can yield a different result. So we are more safe to say that we think that they're overvalued compared to say that they're undervalued with only a 1% upside. There's almost no reason to invest in them when there's only a 1% upside. And Allegiant, although relatively okay numbers, definitely also overvalued from our perspective. So what is the verdict on these stocks overall from our perspective? Well, Ryanair has decent but not rock solid numbers. We see a less downside compared to some of the others, but we do not neither see a big upside. JetBlue, definitely our least favorite stock among the 5. Mesa Airlines, by far the most solid company in terms of numbers, but it looks a bit expensive, at least in the short term. We would urge everybody to take a look at them and see if there's going to come a pullback, and that may be a good opportunity to take an entrance. However, the pullback should be significantly. Then you have Alaska Airlines. Impairment charges have obviously impacted their numbers a bit, but we do not see a small to none upside on them overall. And finally, we have Allegiant, which has relatively solid numbers overall, but it looks very expensive as of today. So at the moment, we would definitely not recommend any of these stocks. They seem a bit overpriced, and we do not see a huge upside on any of them compared to the situation we had in our last video where we saw a good opportunity on Spirit Airlines. Mesa Airlines is definitely the best in terms of the numbers, and if it does a pullback, you should definitely consider to take a position in them, but the pullback has to be significant and not just a few percentages, because we still see that it is quite overvalued as of today. This was all we had for today. We really hope you enjoyed this video. Please note that we are not professional financial advisors, and this is only done for entertainment purposes. Please give us a like, it really helps with the algorithm. Please subscribe for future content that comes out regularly from our site. Please also check our Patreon page. We post a lot of additional content on these stocks and also on companies that we do not show on YouTube. So please take a look, that we would appreciate a lot. And finally, provide a comment in the comment section. Do you agree on our assessment of these companies, or do you think that there's something that we have missed? Please write that. We always appreciate to receive your feedback and your input, because we know that some of you definitely has a very good understanding of some of these companies. Besides that, there's not much more to say than stay safe. Hasta la vista, baby.